Hello everyone, welcome back to Rocks on TV. My name is Joe Nakamoto, and today, for the next 2 hours, you've got me explaining the global news and the financial news told through a Bitcoin lens. Today is Tuesday, 31st of March. It is 11:09 London time, Lisbon time, the best time zone in the world. The block height is currently sat at 943,048. That's 943,048. And the Bitcoin price, how many infinitely printable dollars can we trade for one Bitcoin? The exchange rate is currently sat at $66,260. We have had a slight blip over the past 24 hours due to the fact that, guess what? The quantum FUD is back. Yes, the quantum FUD that we experienced in the Bitcoin space about 3 months ago, about 3 years ago, and about 13 years ago, something that Satoshi Nakamoto himself has been speaking about. Well, was speaking about until he retired from the space. Well, it's now back. It's now dominating Twitter feeds all around the world. And that is going to be one of our big stories that we're going to dive into in the second half of this show today. What else we're going to dive into today? Well, we're going to go through a recap of the world's news over the past 24 hours. We're also going to take a real close look at the quantum alarm, something mentioned in the intro. We're going to look at the Square. You might know Square and Cash App. Cash App's the biggest finance app in the US. Well, Square delivered the opt-in for all of the Bitcoin merchants, all of its merchants rather, not just Bitcoin merchants, all of its merchants around the US could technically accept Bitcoin. But some excitable Bitcoiners went to try this out and they were actually left quite disappointed. So we're going to examine if this Square POS news was rather overhyped. We'll also take a closer look at one of the most touted Bitcoin treasury companies called Nakamoto. You might know Nakamoto because David Bailey headed up this company. It recently bought out Bitcoin Magazine, and it's currently going through somewhat of a bloodbath. Its shares have been dumping. It's down 98 or 99% from its peak, the share price that is, and they have actually been forced to sell BTC recently. So that's another story we'll look at this afternoon. And we'll close off the show with a couple of stories that are really interesting from the States. One is regarding prediction markets. We covered this a couple of weeks ago on Rocks on TV, where it looks like some of the massive prediction markets, which includes Kalshi and Polymarket, some of the states of the US are sort of waging war against them. So we're going to see how they are going to fare, because to the layman, such as myself, when it comes to these prediction markets, they do just look like gambling websites. You are predicting an outcome. And of course, in many instances, there are what seems to be signs of heavy insider trading. That's going to be a story to close off the show. And then we're also going to look at how AI video is a compute sinkhole, that is from OpenAI. So we'll close off the show with that. But yeah, we've got quite a few Bitcoin stories today. We've got a big global and financial news roundup. And yeah, if you're tuning in from around the world, please do let me know. This is not a green screen behind me. We are in fact mining Bitcoin as we speak. And Paddington Bear is still sat atop my Nerd Octax miner, which cost me about 15 euros a month to run. We won't talk about that anymore. But yeah, Paddington Bear is still sat up there because we are still very much sat in the Paddington bear market. We're almost 50% down from all-time highs of October last year. I must apologize as well for my mildly croaky voice. I'm definitely fighting off a cold at the moment, but that's okay. I'm still here with you to give you the Rocks on TV roundup. And the first story today comes to us from Bloomberg. So Bloomberg shared that, they pontificated rather, that oil could hit $200 a barrel. Madness if the Hormuz Strait remains shut. So if you've been living under a rock for the past, I don't know really, 6 months now, because the invasion has been going in Iran for a month, but talks have been going for about 6 months. And obviously the past 60 years, well, no, more than that, 160 years, there's been trouble in the Middle East. Well, industry experts warned Bloomberg Television this morning that oil could hit $150 to $200 a barrel within 6 to 8 weeks if that very busy, very important international oil routes, the Hormuz shipping lane, remains near closed. We're going to take a look at this clip from the video just now, as we've cropped it to where we want it to be.
It does seem like the...
Let's jump forwards to the timestamp that's of interest to us, which is the 26-second mark. And let's hit play.
$10, $15. But the fact really is that every week, 100 million barrels of oil is not going through. And every month, 400 million barrels are not going through. So within a period of time, these losses to the market will be astronomical. And if we continue this for another 6 to 8 weeks, the prices will go through the roof. It doesn't matter what President Trump says.
What is going through the roof? Are we looking at $200 oil? If
we're looking at 150 first and 200 and maybe even more than 200. Beyond 8 weeks, it could go anywhere. And there will definitely be an impact on the global economy. So we have...
All right, so that's Fesharaki, who is the FGE Nexen ECA Chairman Emeritus. For Aiden Fesharaki, try saying that after 9 p.m. in the evening. He says that a prolonged near closure of the Strait of Hormuz could push oil prices to $150 to even $200 per barrel in the next few weeks, and also trigger a severe global economic fallout. Well, I don't know about you guys, but we're already experiencing a economic fallout. I've noticed prices at the pump going up near me. You probably have where you are as well. The secondary and tertiary consequences of oil going up means higher prices for everyone. And it's going to mean job losses, going to mean, greater levels of unemployment, and inevitably governments are going to have to print some more money. So it's just rinse repeat of the constant sort of cycle of crises that we've seen since 2008. This time it's happening due to a war that, how many people wanted this war? Very, very few people. Anyway, I'm going to park my own opinions for a moment and carry on with the news story, because Brent is currently sat at $115 per barrel. That is a whopping 60% increase since February 28th. Bloomberg's reporting across more than 3 dozen industry sources carries a consistent warning. The world still has not grasped the severity of what is happening. It's a really, really sort of interesting outcome to the developments in the Middle East. And I'm curious to hear how much the price of barrels of oil, no, we don't buy barrels of oil when we go to the pump. How much has the price at the pump increased at your petrol station, what do Americans call it? Pump station? Gas station? Your gas station. How much has it increased at your gas station just in the recent weeks? Because we could see it increase more and more. In the UK, the government took aim at some of the big supermarkets that sell petrol and diesel because they said that they were price gouging. But ultimately, these guys are businesses. They need to work out what the price of oil is going to be. And if you get someone as influential as Mr. Fesharaki on Bloomberg TV saying, it's going up to $200 a barrel, then yeah, you're probably going to put your prices up, aren't you? So I don't know if it's price gouging. I don't know if this is, capitalism doing its thing, but ultimately the price of oil is going to keep going for as long as the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Drop a comment if you're around the world. Hit the like and subscribe button if you're watching Roxom TV. We deliver you round-the-clock news coverage regarding, global financial news told through a Bitcoin story. A Bitcoin lens, rather. I can feel my cold clouding my judgment right now. I do apologize for the occasional slip up here. Okay, let's move on to our second story of the day, as we're just parking the oil stories. And that comes to us from the likes of Artemis 2, which is launching tomorrow, which means that we could have the first humans to the moon in 54 years. Yeah, exciting stuff from the moon that we all share. So if we jump to the 126 moment mark of this video, we'll get the rundown of what's actually happening here with this story. Let's make it less in focus.
The reason the US didn't continue after 1972 is that the lunar exploration program was very expensive. it was billions of dollars. And President Nixon at the time pointed out that, well, we've already been there. And more importantly, we have defeated the Soviet Union in this race.
America still talked about going back.
Back to the moon, back to the future.
Returning to the moon is an important step for our space program.
But focus shifted to other priorities like satellites in the International Space Station. Meanwhile, China was building its own moon program. In 2006, its chief scientist said lunar exploration was a reflection of a country's power.
Of a country's power, hey? So, curiously, the countdown is underway. Let's make me full screen instead. Curiously, the countdown is underway at the Kennedy Space Center. NASA is targeting 6:24 p.m. ET tomorrow, April 1st, April Fool's Day, no less, because it's signaling 80% favorable weather. 4 astronauts will be the first humans to travel towards the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. So why that 54-year wait? Well, as the video explained, you know, the idea has been discussed by various presidents across the decades, and now they're finally going back. But this 10-day mission, it doesn't actually go to the moon. It's actually about looping around the moon and coming back. They're going to have their own little moon lunar eclipse. So there's no lunar landing, as this is the test flight ahead of Artemis 3, its planned 2028 surface mission. So Artemis 3 will actually land on the moon, and the crew named their spacecraft Integrity. This is all taking place while the world's oil supply is in crisis and US markets are in a deep, deep correction. A reminder that the government is still funding deep space exploration while Brent sits at $115 a barrel. I mean, I'm curious to hear what you Bitcoiners around the world think about this story, because presumably some of you are quite keen to go to the moon. Bitcoin has always been very keen to go to the moon. So why not put some people on the moon with the Bitcoiners? I believe that ultimately, you know, the government reaching for the stars while the gas stations at home are running dry. The optics are, of course, terrible. But could they have known that Trump was going to potentially put boots on the ground? Could they have known that Trump was going to bomb Iran while they were planning up to do this mission? I find the timing quite interesting. Why is it that more than 50 years later, we're finally putting people back on the moon? What's the purpose? Is this all a distractionary thing? Because obviously this is going to dominate headlines when it does go forward. But it also, like, if I bring a Bitcoin angle into the story, the Integrity, as it's known, this Integrity mission is the ultimate proof of why we need the hard drive of the sky. Bear with me. With companies like SpaceX and NASA pushing further into orbit, the need for space-based Bitcoin nodes, you know, Starlink integrated transactions, that means that in the future, our children, maybe us, if we live long enough, will be able to transact Bitcoin in space with these Bitcoin-based nodes, which are already running. Blockstream has one, a satellite, and also there's Starlink all over the shop now. So presumably you can then transact Bitcoin in space, because it's very unlikely that you're going to use HSBC when you're up there. Bitcoin, of course, is also the only currency, I think, in the world that works in a vacuum. So it should be the native ledger of the inevitable spacefaring civilization we're going to become, while our terrestrial energy grid suffers somewhat. So yeah, there's a thought for project yourself into the year 2100, and we have more and more people living in space, perhaps living on other planets. Maybe it's not even as far as 2100, because the rate of progress right now is quite staggering. It could be as early as, 2000, I don't know, maybe 2040. Does that sound reasonable, that we have people actually living more regularly in space? They're probably going to be paying for things in Bitcoin. Although I imagine there's a utopian image of a world in which we don't use money anymore. But I think that ultimately humans, for as long as we've been around, have always tried to be in debt in some way to other humans. And for that, we have used money to reflect that. So I think that, yeah, we're not going to get rid of money anytime soon. And therefore, this spacefaring civilization is likely going to use the money that works in space, which is probably Bitcoin. Okay, can I draw in a historical echo to this story? Well, if you look at the Great Pyramids in Egypt, there is a profound irony in a civilization building its most magnificent monuments and its most magnificent moments while the city below is in turmoil. Just as the pharaohs dedicated the empire's resources to the afterlife, while the Nile's floods became unpredictable, the US, it is currently prioritizing the integrity of the lunar program while the integrity of the domestic economy is being tested by a war-driven energy famine. So it's not the first time that we've seen, late-stage civilizations, late-stage empires distract and also dedicate energy and resources to perhaps the wrong things. But this is just the nature of the world we live in nowadays. We have someone dropping into the chat. Andre, yes, this is a new channel. Hello, mate. Good for you to be with me more. He says, about the moon. I recall Buzz Aldrin's health concerns. Buzz Aldrin was, of course, the second man on the moon, and his connection to the Tranquility Lodge number 2000, the Freemasons, where he was reportedly receiving oxygen. Andre, do go on. This sounds like an interesting nugget, an interesting thing to delve into. Curious to hear if Buzz Aldrin's dead now, right? He must be. If he was in his 30s in 1960s, there's no way he's made it here, has he? Oh my God, he's still alive. He's 96 years old. What a dude. How has he done that? Okay, fair, man. Maybe going to the moon is the ultimate longevity hack. Forget your olive oil shots in the morning and avoiding the sun. Get closer to it. Go to the moon. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Did not know that Buzz Aldrin was still with us. Maybe they should, presumably his ashes or something will be blown into space when he does eventually die. But 96 years old for Buzz Aldrin. That's a decent innings. Okay, let's move to our third story of the recap of the day. And this regards Israel winding its Lebanon ground operation. Lots of news reports around the world have been focusing on this story, and in particular, the huge migration caused by Israel attacking Lebanon. If I can bring up the media here, beautiful. We can have a closer look. There we go. So we're looking at it from the Al Jazeera news platform just now. But Netanyahu, who is the leader of Israel, he ordered his military on Sunday to further expand its ground operation in southern Lebanon. And he pushed to extend what he calls a security buffer zone. He invoked the Gaza model explicitly, saying Israel has created 3 security zones deep within enemy territory across Gaza, Syria, and now Lebanon. Since March the 2nd, more than 1,200 people have been killed in Lebanon and nearly 1 million displaced. That's 20% of the country's entire population. And next, we have a little clip from Israel and their Israel Defense Forces. Some wonderful propaganda from them. So let's check out what they're saying.
For years, we have been defending our northern border against Hezbollah's attacks on our civilians. They have continued to rearm and re-weaponize in violation of the ceasefire agreement.
That's our first clip. So we've got some pretty heavy-hitting propaganda. The next clip I wanted to show you is at the 45-second mark, so we'll jump ahead to that.
As part of their war tactic. On March 2nd, they chose to join the Iranian terror regime in their attacks against Israel, putting both Israeli and Lebanese civilians at risk. This is exactly what we are operating against. As we continue to strike Hezbollah terror targets, IDF troops are positioned in forward defensive points along the border.
Okay, so we're examining the fact that Israel is positioning more troops towards Lebanon. And finally,
if the Lebanese government will not disarm Hezbollah, the IDF will. We will not allow Hezbollah to rearm, and we will continue operating in order to protect our civilians on our northern border.
Okay, so fighting talk from the Israel Defense Forces. I am, saddened to learn of all these Lebanese who have been displaced, many of whom have been killed. The Indonesian peacekeepers, 3 of them from the UN peacekeepers from Indonesia, they were killed in Israeli strikes. and the Lebanese army is now taking direct casualties at checkpoints. We also heard of some journalists losing their lives over the weekend. There was a viral video of I believe, British journalist who a missile literally landed next to, which was another Israeli missile. So which propaganda do you believe? Which side do you understand? How do you get to the truth of the matter? Well, the first thing you have to establish is that no one is accurately telling the truth here, because this is war, and the first casualty of war is truth. So Israel has got their propaganda machine running full speed. The US has got its propaganda machine running full speed. The Lebanese and, of course, the Hezbollah are doing their thing as well. This is just what happens, and we're here to try to cut through it all, but ultimately underscore that, well, if you are living in Lebanon right now, as many of my Bitcoiner friends do, and in a region where the local currency, which is the LBP, was already a ghost, and the physical banking infrastructure is being literally pulverized, then Bitcoin becomes the sovereignty exit, doesn't it? Because for the 1 million displaced Lebanese, a seed phrase is the only asset that cannot be seized at a checkpoint or buried under the rubble of a security zone. Bitcoin, in these instances, it's kind of what it's made for. It's the ultimate humanitarian tool for those whose lives have been reduced to just collateral damage. I'd be curious to hear from you guys in the chat this morning. Do you know of any people who are currently fleeing Lebanon, or maybe they're just used to it because, unfortunately, this is just one area of the world which is constantly in a period of intense tension? There's a historical echo to the story, though, because, Netanyahu's strategy of security zones, whatever that means, because it's more just, social constructs chucked onto these warring factions. It mirrors that of the Roman limes, in fact, which were the permanent fortified frontier, which was meant to keep the barbarians, as they were known back then, at bay. Historically, these zones, of course, they never bring peace. They only formalize the conflict, they entrench the conflict, and they make it into more of a permanent state of siege. So the expansion in 2026 by Israel is the creation of a modern militarized frontier that threatens to swallow the entire Levant. So with Trump threatening to put boots on the ground, with Netanyahu claiming last year that he'd wiped out Hezbollah, and now Hezbollah fights back. We had the Houthi rebels involving themselves, who are, of course, funded by Iran. This small, easily finished war in Iran looks to be escalating at an increasing rate. Naturally, markets are dumping, oil is going higher and higher, and radical uncertainty is through the roof. It's a pretty weird time to be alive. Honestly, this feels stranger than the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of like what is actually going on. At least with COVID, there was some semblance of, I think we can track that. Yes, we know that government are fudging figures here. Yes, we know that this isn't quite right. Let's all discuss vaccines for the next 6 months. But here we have military leaders putting out their own militarized propaganda to justify the killing and the destruction that they desire. And we're expected to just sit here and make sense of it and try to sort of store our wealth somewhere, store our time and energy somewhere. So it's a pretty weird time to be alive, guys. But at least there's Bitcoin, at least it's sort of holding up somewhat in the 60K mark, where realistically, I think it's going to be sat for the next 6 to 12 months. Like, I don't believe that we're going to get any sort of respite in this Bitcoin bear market for quite some time. I will not be removing the Paddington bear market from behind me on my wonderful Bitcoin miners. I think that's just the nature of it. Hey ho. But let's focus on Iran a little bit more. Let's double click on what Trump is willing to do to end the war without reopening Hormuz. And yet we are going to dive into this a little bit more in the closing of the show today, because Trump told aides that he is willing to end the US military campaign against Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. The Wall Street Journal reported this yesterday afternoon, and they cited administration officials. So we believe that this is genuinely happening, but as with many things that Trump says, got to take it with a sort of small dump truck of salt. The assessment inside the White House is that forcing the waterway open, which, as we know, transmits anywhere from between 15% to 25% of all the world's oil, it is effectively this really incredible, really busy, really important waterway. But forcing that open would push the conflict beyond Trump's 4 to 6 week timeline, which, by the way, when we get to the 6 week mark, he will call it an 8 week timeline. And when it gets to the 8 week mark, he will call it a 12 week timeline. But the plan is to wind down hostilities, hand the reopening problem to European and Gulf allies, and deal with it diplomatically later. Secretary of State Mark Rubio, he confirmed it publicly. The military mission finishes within weeks. Then, he says, it's up to Iran to decide. On the same day, Iran's parliament voted to formally codify that decision, passing legislation to impose permanent tolls on Hormuz and explicitly forbidding the US and Israel from passing. 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through that strait. Trump started a war demanding that it open and reopen immediately. And he's now prepared to leave it in Iranian hands. And Iran, well, it just wrote that into war. And here we have a clip coming from the White House where they discuss this idea of just leave it. So let's see if we can get this on stage just now to show the clip. Talks are continuing and going well, guys. We should believe her. And we should also take it with a pinch of salt. No? The other clip I wanted to show you is at the 30-second mark. So, apparently you guys do not have the sound on those clips. Let me give it one more attempt to share sound. Apologies for that. I don't know why this sometimes does happen.
While they still can. Despite all of the public posturing you hear from the regime and false reporting, talks are continuing and going well. What is said publicly is, of course, much different than what's being communicated to us privately. As a result, President Trump issued a 10-day to postpone planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. This remains a truly once-in-a-generation opportunity for the regime to make a good deal with the United States, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and stop acting as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
There you have it. Do a good deal with the US, Iran. Go on, be a good boy and do a good deal with Iran. I mean, it's just... it's also tiresome, hey? It's also tiresome. Let's jump into the chat and see what people are commenting on. We have Andre Amarim saying, psychological operations. Yes, psyops. They are one of my favorite bits of sort of history. What's your favorite psyop? That became true, by the way, because, you know, they have to have come true at some point. But yeah, they are a very real phenomenon. That's what Andre shares. He says, as a Bitcoin anarchist, I like to get information with the aid of apps like Ground News. Do you rate Ground News? Because Ground News is the website that gives you a bias rating, I believe, on various websites. So, for example, if you're looking at a piece from The Telegraph, it'll be like, okay, this paper historically skews right. It tends to have more royalist views. Or if you, say, looked at a piece from The Guardian, you'd be like, okay, this paper is very left, or, you know, at least a little bit left, and has been very pro-vaccines in the past. And it might be a piece about medical information. I'm curious to see if you actually rate using Ground News. I've been targeted a lot with it because, you know, actually I spent a lot of time looking at the news. Thank you, by the way, to Max Trotter. Hello, Mr. Max, for sharing that the clip audio was not working. We will continue with our recap of the past sort of 24 hours of news. But firstly, let's just try to bring up a Bitcoin angle to this story because, you know, the freedom of the seas, you know, that used to be the era of the US Navy, right? But right now, the US Navy is unable to ship oil. And what it could do is it could ship stats, you know. Bitcoin bypasses, bear with me, it bypasses the tolls of the physical world. While Iran writes maritime exclusion laws, the Bitcoin network continues to process blocks every 10 minutes, indifferent to those who control the water. Trump is realizing that you can't just bomb a choke point back into a free market, but you can opt out of that market using decentralized rails. Now, this term, opt out, like saving Bitcoin and opt out, I think that opt out is underrated in terms of how we use it, because you don't have to, you can opt out of anything. I know that sounds like a really basic bitch thing to say, but the social norms, the discussions in things that you shouldn't be discussing, like, of course, there's a certain element of opting into things just for the natural sort of social lubricant of the day and to make sure that you're not just being a dick for the sake of being a dick. But opting out of drinking alcohol, for example, opting out of eating processed food, opting out of consuming the news, or at least consuming the mainstream news, opting out of doing those social conventions that we never really question and don't realize that they actually might have some negative externalities or negative harms on our lives. I think that's the true sort of ethos of Bitcoin that I hadn't really like properly evaluated and understood. I thought Bitcoin literally just meant opt out of the mainstream financial or the mainstream legacy financial system. But in reality, you can apply this opt out method to various other parts of your life, and you might even feel better for it. So yeah, what is the one thing that you could maybe be opting out of that would make your life a bit better, your partner's or your family's life a bit better, that maybe you'd overlooked? There's definitely something you're doing every day that you can definitely opt out of. For me, my big one was opting out of vertical content. Everyone is scrolling, everyone is doom scrolling. It's become socially acceptable to be like, oh yeah, I caught myself doom scrolling the other day. Oh yeah, as you do, you're just in bed doom scrolling. I'm like, no, opt out. I do not want to doom scroll anymore. Doom scrolling is stupid. It is fake. It is a waste of time. Puts you in a crap mood. Opt out of doom scrolling. Just don't even bother. It's not worth it. Anytime you find yourself swiping your finger through, what's it called? Vertical content, you failed. Opt out. Absolutely opt out of that. That's my one thing. What is the one thing that you have opted out of that everyone does, or everyone implicitly does? And you know what? It's actually completely overrated and not worth doing. Trump, for example, he opted out of telling the truth a long time ago, but I wouldn't recommend that one. Anyway, what can we draw comparisons with this Hormuz crisis? Well, it's just like the Suez crisis of 2026, isn't it? Sorry, this is the Suez crisis of 2026, but it's comparable with the 1956 Suez crisis, because in 1956, Britain and France realized they could no longer dictate terms in the Middle East. When Trump prepares to walk away from a closed Hormuz, he is effectively acknowledging that the US has lost its maritime hegemony. The world is watching the moment that this superpower realized it could no longer clear the road. It's pretty fascinating how this war is developing, and it just seems to copy every other war that the US was dragged into over the past 80 years now, since the US went from being the world's sort of police force, the world's sort of lapdog, like just jumping into whatever war and territory we throw its way. Okay, we're going to move on to another story, which was a bombshell in the Charlie Kirk murder case. This was originally reported by the Washington Post, or the Weibo, over the past 24 hours, because a court filing dropped in the case of the 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. This is the bloke, if you remember, who was charged with assassinating Charlie Kirk at Utah University last September. And the bombshell is that ATF forensic analysts were unable to match the bullet recovered from Kirk's body to Robinson's rifle. Yes, conspiracy theories abound. Conspiracy theorists, get your tinfoil hats on. Defense attorneys filed a motion Friday to delay the May 18th preliminary hearing by at least 6 months, citing the bullet mismatch as potentially exculpatory evidence, alongside multiple unresolved DNA profiles found on evidence items. Let's not forget that Robinson, this 22-year-old, who was 21 at the time, he faces the death penalty, and the prosecution's case has rested on a text message confession to his partner, DNA on a towel wrapped around the rifle, and surveillance footage. The bullet, though, this is, of course, the core physical evidence, and the government's own agency cannot place it. So what is going on here, guys? We have the expert opinion, we have the world opinion that this guy is guilty, But when it comes to the actual cryptographic proof of who killed Charlie Kirk, they're struggling to put the case together. So in the legal world, truth is a negotiation between lawyers and ATF analysts who can be wrong. In the Bitcoin world, truth is mathematically absolute. We are moving towards a future where proof of evidence might one day be secured on a blockchain to prevent the kind of ballistic ambiguity that currently determines whether a 22-year-old, whether they live or they die, because this chap is facing the death penalty. I thought that case was cut and dry. I thought that really they knew that Tyler Robinson was responsible for it. Kind of wild to think that the bullet doesn't necessarily, they say, match the gun. Okay, one more story from the recap this morning before we take a quick break, and then we'll dive into our big deep dive of the day, which is regarding Bitcoin and quantum, because guess what? Quantum is going viral again. Let's bring up an article for this one. This comes from the UN Trade and Development Department, who have shared the massive implications for global trade on and development even in the Middle East. Because as we know, the Strait of Hormuz, the place we can't stop hearing about on a daily basis now, it is a vital component for trade. And a UN study found that Arab nations could lose up to $200 billion from the Iran war. The mechanism is straightforward and it's brutal. The Gulf states lose approximately $1.1 billion per day in oil revenue while Hormuz remains closed because they cannot export despite rising prices. The standard equation that producers benefit from oil shocks inverts entirely when the export route is severed. So you got Kuwait, you've got Qatar and Bahrain and Iraq. All of these have effectively zero alternative export routes. Lots of idiots on Twitter are saying, oh, why can't you just drive the oil across the desert? Terrible idea. We're talking so many quantities of oil and you want to put them on a bunch of trucks and just drive them into the desert. You guys are crazy. Anyway, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have limited pipeline bypass capacity, but nowhere near enough to offset the shortfall. The impact of this war is also being felt in the food sector. 70% of the Gulf food imports move through the Hormuz. 40 to 120% consumer price spikes have already hit the region, and Iranian strikes on desalination plants. These, of course, threaten the primary drinking water source for Kuwait, for Qatar, and for Bahrain. The UN is calling for immediate de-escalation and protection of civilian infrastructure. So the war rages on. The UAE, the Middle East, it suffers. The Gulf states, they're sitting on massive amounts of stranded energy because they cannot export the oil, though. They are perhaps pivoting to the one thing you can export through a fiber optic cable, and that's hashes. We are seeing more and more nation states in the Middle East pivot to mining, pivot to AI, because it's very, very hard to sell oil right now, but you can monetize the electrons which the oil generates, and that is, of course, Bitcoin. We have Oman mining Bitcoin. We have the Middle East as a whole sort of exploring more with balancing grids with Bitcoin mining. And as a result, we've seen the hash rate in recent weeks go absolutely parabolic, despite the fact that the Bitcoin price tends to go down, down, down. I mean, the total hash rate, let's bring it up onto the screen right now. It's kind of wild how much it has been increasing. Actually, no, it peaked. What am I talking about? It peaked in 19th of October, 2025. And since then, it's actually been really, really going down. I mean, if we look at the general trend of the hash rate, if you look at my screen just now, you will see that it is generally up and to the right. And for whatever reason, it does tend to follow somewhat the Bitcoin price. But yeah, the peak was, how many zettahash was it? I think it was about 1.1 zettahash. Now it's at just shy. No, it's still 1 zettahash. So we're slightly, 10% down from the previous peak, while the Bitcoin price is, of course, sitting at $65,000, $66,000. We're not doing so well in Bitcoin land right now. Yeah, we're $66,000. And today is the last day of March. So maybe we get 6 months of red. But, maybe these Middle Eastern countries, they start to pivot more and more to Bitcoin because they see the value in it. They see the value in Bitcoin mining. and what Bitcoin mining can do in terms of monetizing stranded energy, particularly in a time of war. But who is going to ship those miners to them right now? I just don't know. Anyway, this story is a bit similar to the 14th century collapse of the Silk Road during the Wars of Tamerlane. Bear with me. When the trade routes died in this 14th century, the middleman civilizations, which were the great trading hubs of the Middle East, they starved. Today, we can effectively think of the Strait of Hormuz as a maritime Silk Road, not the Bitcoin Silk Road. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the old-fashioned Silk Road, the one the internet Bitcoin Silk Road was styled on, because the maritime Silk Road of the Gulf is being severed, and the region is finding out that you cannot eat oil and you cannot drink a closed strait. Okay, so to keep you up to speed over the past 24 hours, we had oil fever, as this Bloomberg analyst warned of a $200 oil price very soon. He says even by as early as May. Secondly, we are watching for the moon shot, which is Artemis 2 is taking launch tomorrow, possibly later on this evening. Third story, to recap you all, is that there is the Lebanese buffer as Netanyahu is formalizing 3 permanent war zones over there. Fourth story was regarding Hormuz and the tolls taking place there. You know, Iran is codifying its permanent ban on US or Israeli ships. Fifth story is the sort of conspiratorial nature of the Charlie Kirk murder. The ATF ballistics failed to match the bullet to the Robinson rifle. And the sixth story is about the overall Gulf collapse. You know, the UN says that Arab nations face up to $200 billion in this war loss. And the underlying message to this all is that I hope you've got some Bitcoin, guys, because things are going to get weirder and weirder out there. One of my favorite conversations last week at Cheat Code event in Bedford actually was we were discussing about the nature of AI and how easy it is to code up bots and to do scams and frauds and romance scams and all these kind of things. And he basically turned to me and said, listen, I used to work in banking. I think that this year or next year, we're going to have more and more banks limiting withdrawals, stopping people being able to move their own money because they simply cannot prove who you are. So Bitcoin in self-custody, Bitcoin that only you can remove and hold, is going to be so important. But those bank runs, similar to Cyprus, those bank freezings, similar to, who's done this recently? I'm trying to think. But, you know, when they freeze funds and they say, basically, you cannot withdraw this because we need to prove your identity, that's going to happen in a really, really big way, purely due to the fact that, well, AI and bots is going to overwhelm the banking system. I'm going to take a quick break, rehydrate, blow my nose, and I will be back in 3 minutes, 8 seconds to deliver our big story about quantum computing. Oh yeah, baby, quantum computing is back all over our timelines. Make sure you're liking and subscribing on the YouTube, and we will be back very, very shortly. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in 3 minutes.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index is collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Fuck. Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Rocks on TV. It is Thursday. Oh, Thursday. It's not Thursday. It's Tuesday, mate. Tuesday, 31st March, 2026. And I am looking forward to deliver you the second part of the show where we take some of the topics dominating the news and we dive in with a bit more depth. We're also going to cover some Bitcoin stories which have caught my attention. We're going to cover them with a little bit of skepticism, though. And ultimately, like overall, if we can sum up this show in the next hour, then we are witnessing a sort of singular discontinuity in the history of digital security and global power, because the legacy systems of the 20th century and the legacy system that is the network state, because it is ultimately an increasingly defunct piece of technology, these are colliding head on with computational and with geopolitical realities of a increasingly post-fiat world. What the hell do I mean by that? Well, let's jump into some of the headlines of this afternoon's show. So we're going to lead with the quantum alarm, which comes from Mountain View. So Google has effectively put a ticking clock on the entire cryptographic world because they demonstrated that the maths that protect your life savings, in the form of Bitcoin, of course, it could be solved in minutes by the end of the decade. Let's take a sort of sprinkle of salt on that, though, because this report was funded by members of the Ethereum Foundation. The Ethereum guys are very quick to throw it all around. And a lot of the time, these Ethereum guys, they really want to pump their bags at the behest of Bitcoin. We'll then move to the front lines of Iran, where the security zone narrative is serving as a thin diplomatic veil for the undeniable arrival of American boots on the ground. Yes, Trump made musings yesterday that there could be as many as 1,000 military personnel from the US arriving into Iran. We'll then move on to the domestic fear, where we analyze Jack Dorsey's Block company and its sort of nationwide rollout of Bitcoin at the point of sale. Is this the dawn of a new circular economy, or could this be a high-tech tax trap? We also cover the catastrophic Nakamoto treasury collapse. Please let me know if you hold Nakamoto in your portfolio. My God, that stock has not done so well, where David Bailey, he provided a masterclass in how not to manage a sovereign reserve. Finally, we'll look at the legal war against Kalshi and prediction markets more globally as the state attempts to blind the truth machine of prediction markets. Bitcoin is currently sat at the, where are we now? I think we're still at 67, aren't we? $66,347. Remember, the dollar is a terrible, terrible measuring stick because it is still being inflated at an increasing rate. So we never know really if this price, what it actually means. But basically, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. That's what we're going to know. Morning, Steve. How you doing, mate? I hope you've recovered from Bedfordshire. What a place to be. And Andre, he's he shares, I'm skeptical that quantum computing can execute Shor's algorithm. Like Sabine Hostenfelder, I assume she's German, I believe much of the current research seems specious, primarily serving to justify continued investment. Yes, thank you, Andre. That's also my take. But let's sort of dive into the news first, because, yeah, the Google quantum AI researchers, Ryan Babush and Hartmut Neven, they released a definitive white paper today/last night that sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity community, through the Bitcoin community, mostly, though, through the crypto community. Because for many years now, the quantum threat was a bit of a boogeyman that was slated for the 2040s. Today, Google revealed a 20-fold reduction in the resources needed to break elliptic curve cryptography. Let's chuck a tweet on stage just now so that we can understand what we're talking about. So yeah, let's show this one. So this is part of the paper. You can see on my screen just now. Meanwhile, Steve, he says, what does he say? He says, with quantum, everything else needs to be made resistant before Bitcoin. Why doesn't Google mention all banks, utilities, etc. will be open to before Bitcoin is susceptible? Yeah, I asked the same question. Why is this paper basically saying, oh, cryptocurrencies are vulnerable? And it's like, well, surely everything is vulnerable. But I think it's because some of the writers of this paper are big Ethereum bulls, very, very, very big Ethereum holders. For example, you'll see Justin Drake there. Justin Drake is a really interesting one because he is one of the biggest Ethereum heads I think I've ever known. And yet recently, bizarrely, he changed his name on Twitter. Let me prove it to you now. Where is it? Justin Drake, where is he? I'm not a big fan of him. I was going to call him an insult there, but I shouldn't. Where is he? Here we go. This fella. He calls himself a Bitcoin security researcher. I'm sorry, but the cheek, the absolute cheek. He is mentioned on this paper. He is a huge Ethereum bull. And I think a lot of the guys that wrote this paper are really quite into Ethereum. But yeah, I'll jump into the story a little bit first before we go any further. And I'll hold back with my opinion somewhat. But yeah, Steve, you asked the right question. Let's carry on with the story, though. So the research proves that a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, also known as a CRQC, it can execute Shor's algorithm with fewer than 1,200 logical qubits. On a fast clock superconducting system, the exact architecture that Google is currently scaling, this means that recovering a private key from a public key would take minutes, not years. So don't expose your public keys. Don't use addresses more than once. Just use your address, get paid to it, send money to it, whatever it is, and then don't use it again. Google has set a 2029 target for full migration to post-quantum cryptography. And Justin Drake, who I mentioned, he now calls himself a prominent Bitcoin security researcher, called the timeline shocking, noting that the on-spend attack is now a tactical reality. A quantum computer could identify a transaction in the public mempool, crack the key, and front-run the victim before the next block is even mined. Now, this is important to Bitcoin. This is not an existential risk, but it is something that the devs are working on. Yeah, it's not just a technical hurdle. It's somewhat of an existential crisis for the many, many lost millions of coins. You know, that's the sort of thing that a quantum computer is going to go after first. Because while active users, such as you guys watching around the world, you can migrate to post-quantum cryptography safe addresses via, for example, a soft fork, which the chaps at Blockstream are working on. Satoshi's roughly 1.1 million BTC, the Patoshi addresses, and millions of other zombie coins, they sit in what is known as P2PK, which is paid to public key addresses that were initially exposed at creation. These coins represent more than $100 million. No, not at today's prices, about $80 billion worth of bounty for the first entity, which is state or private. And that could, before, you know, these guys could get that money before Q Day, as it's known, which is, you know, quantum computing day. So the network is now in somewhat of a race to implement quantum resistant signatures before the history of the blockchain becomes a harvestable field for the state or others. I have got a bunch of tweets here to go through to sort of jump into the story a little bit more. I wasn't that scared looking at this story today. We've heard quantum Fed for so long. But the key thing to look at here is that, okay, quantum AI was involved. Okay, California. Yeah, Department of Computer Science, University of California. Okay, that makes sense. Ethereum Foundation, why are they funding this? Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, that's fine. But their key thing is, as I've highlighted here, are we on screen? We're not on screen, that's right. Sorry, I'm going to bring up this piece of paper again, this paper, because you need to see that one of the key things here is that the Ethereum Foundation is behind this paper. And they say that their analysis reveals that the first fast clock QCs would enable on-spend attacks on public member transactions on some cryptocurrencies. And they basically talk about how ZK proofs and everything else is really good because, Ethereum uses those. So I don't know. Here's a Bitcoin developer, a former Bitcoin developer rather, Jonas Schnelli, who said that going from 1,000 noisy qubits to 500K fault tolerance ones by 2029 isn't just a roadmap. It's a physical miracle or a massive bluff. He knows something about Bitcoin that we don't, so it might be worth looking into. One of the big Ethereum heads, he shared that Bitcoin is dead by 2029. Yeah, that's a bit of rage bait for you guys. Bitcoin is dead. That's it. Pack it in. 2029. We've only got 3 more years of having fun with Bitcoin. Paolo, one of the biggest Bitcoin holders with his company, Tether, he simply tweeted the word Q for what? Exactly right. We don't know. And Andrew Harrod, who I think has come back to Bitcoin, he's the guy that likes to spend dollars, not Bitcoin. Sorry, Andrew, if you're listening. But yeah, you got caught spending dollars in El Salvador, which is shame on you, sir. If you're in Bitcoin country, you should be spending Bitcoin. But he says, if Google scares you into selling your Bitcoin, then you never deserved it in the first place. If you're confused, this tweet will make a lot more sense in 10 years. So there is your bull-tiled post of the day, courtesy of Andrew. I think he works with Bull Bitcoin now, which is a fucking fabulous exchange, which is really, really cool. And then Max, the VC. God, it's almost like predictable what people are going to say based on what their interests are. You've got VCs and Ethereum heads saying Bitcoin is dead. You've got the Bitcoin bull-tards saying, meh, never selling, don't care, move on. And you have some of the Bitcoin devs being like, is this for real? Like, guys, we're working on this already. So it is a bit existentialism. I think it's existentialism. Yeah. Jean-Paul Sartre, he brought up the idea that you seek advice from the people based on the position that they have already. For example, if you wanted to do so, if you're looking for advice on what to do next in life and you went to an anarchist, it's because you were looking for revolution. And if you went to seek advice from a priest, it's because you are looking for the religious path, the moral, ethical path. And it's very true about, like, if you want to understand what's going on in the world of quantum computing, then if you go to an Ethereum head, they're going to tell you that Bitcoin is dead. If you go to a VC, they'll tell you that they're going to be investing in all sorts of quantum projects. And if you go to a Bitcoin dev, they'll say, yeah, we're working on it. I don't know how I just managed to bring up Jean-Paul Sartre and the quantum computing debacle, but that's because I host a live stream on Roxxon TV, and sometimes I say stuff that comes into my head based on the day. But yeah, Max the VC, who's got loads of followers, he invests in all sorts of crypto projects. He says Google is basically saying, we've cut the quantum resources needed to break Bitcoin's encryption by 20x. We can now break it. We can prove it. We're just not going to tell you how. Lol. We've slowed down research to give crypto a chance. He means Bitcoin, not crypto. You have until 2029 to figure out a solution. I don't know, man. This all seems like a rehash of what's going on last year. Now, here we have Salvatore Ingala, who is a very, very smart cookie who I've introduced at various stages doing technical stuff in Bitcoin all around the world. And he says, that the quantum apocalypse is closer and closer, and yet. Here we have the years from 2000 on the x-axis. We have the years left before quantum apocalypse on the y-axis. And we crossed the point of years being left from the quantum apocalypse in the year 2026. And it hasn't happened yet. So I'm confused. But yeah, he's a smart guy that I understand very little of, but he's also shared this meme here saying, a crypto nerd's imagination, his laptop is encrypted, let's build a quantum computer to crack it. No good, it's quantum resistant. Oh blast, our evil plan is foiled. What would actually happen? His laptop's encrypted. Okay, make him run pip install. Okay, got it. So basically there are far more interesting and useful hacks to be following into rather than the quantum nonsense. And then, yeah, here is the tweet that has 200,000 views from Justin Drake, who calls himself a Bitcoin security researcher. He's not. He's been a Ethereum guy for the past, I don't know how long. But the key thing he said, which sort of shows his bias, is if you search the word Bitcoin in this tweet, he says, Bitcoin proof of work. He basically says that this is now... He says that commercially viable Bitcoin proof of work via Grover's algorithm is not happening anytime soon. We're talking decades, possibly centuries away. This observation should help focus the discussion on ECDSA and Schnorr. And he says, a side note, as an unofficial Bitcoin security researcher, I still believe that Bitcoin proof of work is cooked due to the dwindling security budget. So there we go. There's his little bias hiding in plain sight. This guy is a massive Ethereum bull. He is obviously advocating there that Bitcoin proof of work should be stopped. Yeah, most Bitcoiners worth their weight in salt know that proof of work is one of the foundational principles of Bitcoin. It's one of the best things about it. And I'm going to jump into the chat now to see what people are saying about this around the world. Have a little sip of coffee too. So yeah, Steve rightly shares that the biggest honeypot is the Satoshi coins. Yeah, if Bitcoin does get quantum hacked, quantum cracked, whatever you want to call it, then they're obviously going to go after Satoshi's coins, then any coins that have had multiple address reuse. All centralized government databases will be available on the dark web way before that happens, because ultimately criminals have priorities. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's absolutely the way it's going to go. Let's see. I have informed, Andre says, Erdse, Holze, and Parathasathi Ranganathan of the Ethereum bullshit campaign as they discuss Bitcoin in their book, Data Center as a Computer, 4th edition. Andre, tell me more. What do you mean? I am curious by what you're saying there. But yeah, ultimately, all this quantum stuff, I often wait until the much smarter people than me have their say on it. I sift through all the nonsense and I just try to look at the inherent biases within the people that are sharing all this quantum stuff. Because, yeah, I mean, the ETH guy saying that Bitcoin is going to break soon is a classic sort of that obviously the ETH guys want Bitcoin to break because they want Bitcoin to be ultrasound money or the Internet of Things or whatever else it is. There are so many viral tweets on this, and I don't really want to go into it too much. But, you know, there's another one from this fella with 120,000 followers who says, you know, quantum's a nothing burger. Because first, these big corporations will not harm their quantum computers to theoretical researchers to break blockchains. Second, breaking big blockchains to steal money is still stealing money, which is against the law. And third, by the time people with the intention to rob blockchains using quantum tech get their hands on it, devs would have patched the resistance into them. It's a bit of a basic take, but it's something that I kind of subscribe to. It is a bit of a, is it a nothing burger? I think it's something that's interesting to talk about at times. It's something that has kept the Bitcoin community completely entranced. I mean, even Checkmate looks to be pretty scared about this. Well, why is he scared? He says, I read the paper to the best of my ability. I'm willing to entertain the idea that if we have a genuine quantum computing threat on the cards, Bear in mind that Checkmate has, I don't know, tens of thousands of subscribers to his Substack. He's a very well-regarded Bitcoin analyst, Bitcoin on-chain analyst. You know, he used to work at Glassnode. Now he does his own thing, and he's often invited on podcasts and stages. He's supposed to be at Cheat Code last week, actually, in Bedford. But he says, at a minimum, it would be a mistake to not take it seriously and start developing a post-quantum computing formal plan for Bitcoin. Having a plan and not needing it is far better than the other way around. But there is already a post-quantum plan underway. There is already lots of researchers working on this. So I don't understand all of the hype, all of the fear porn around this. Why do we need to just keep regurgitating quantum threat stuff every couple of weeks? He then goes on to ask, the one question I can't help but ask is the following. This paper, if I understand it correctly, is Google saying we have cracked the design for a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. That is a very big deal. So why, oh why, and this is the question that a lot of you have registered already, why, oh why did they focus the paper on our blockchain bags? Not just the blockchain bags, the Bitcoin blockchain bags. Not on government codes, not on banking infrastructure, and not on internet protocols. But they focused it on the 2 trillion asset that is Bitcoin. He says, I'm by no means disqualifying, but certainly it's an odd thing to be the topic of interest for such a discovery. Now, Jeff, who I very much look up to, he's building an app called White Noise, which is a sort of complementary app to Signal. You'll probably use Signal, but Jeff is building Signal with Nostr in mind. Really good dude. He says, my read on the paper was that they were not asserting such a broadly sweeping breakthrough. The main point is we have, trust me, bro, new methods to reduce the difficulty of the discrete log problem, which means we require a much smaller, simpler quantum compute to break ECC in specific situations. The specific situations part is important. They need to have exposed public keys and a time window of opportunity to exploit. So there you go. Andre shares that they are big bosses in Google infrastructure. This is Urza Holtzler and Parathasarathy Ranganathan. So these are big bosses in the big Google infrastructure, and he's informed them about Bitcoin in their book, Data Center as a Computer, the 4th edition. Okay, please drop your thoughts in regarding quantum computing, about what's going on with that space. I mean, for me, it's kind of a fun time to be alive as someone that is not technically apt or technically able, because it kind of mirrors the secret war that took place at Bletchley Park. Yes, this was when Benedict Cumberbatch famously cracked the Nazi Enigma code. Just kidding, just checking you're listening. It was Alan Turing, of course. Alan Turing and the Allies cracked the Nazi Enigma code, and they did this in secret at Bletchley Park, which you can visit, by the way. It's very near Bedford. And they didn't hold a press conference. They used their, for want of a better word, alpha to quietly win the war, sometimes allowing tactical tragedies to occur to keep their edge a secret. Google, in this case, is supposedly responsibly disclosing this info via zero knowledge proofs, but the coordination with the US government suggests that the ultra secret of the 21st century, the ability to crack any private key, will probably, inevitably, undoubtedly be weaponized by the state long before the public is told that the maths is officially broken. As per usual with these things, we don't really know what the state is actually up to. We don't know what stage they are at, but yeah, we need to keep, what's the word? Monitoring the situation and keeping abreast of it while knowing that the devs are working hard on it. I wonder if Adam Back has said anything about this, because I know that he has his boys at Blockstream working on quantum compute. Has he said anything today regarding the weird how you can't even search Adam Back and he appears on Twitter? Search is so bad. Adam Back is currently tweeting about Bitcoin treasury companies. Oh God. Okay. Let's see if he has said anything about quantum compute. No, he's not. He's basically saying that Bitfinex longs are at an all-time high, and that the Bitfinex whale continues to buy Bitcoin every minute, all day, adding to its long. Okay, fair enough. He's not really talking about quantum compute right now. Maybe he will say something today. Shang Tsung, hello, mate. How are you? How's your day going? Good to be with you. Okay, I'm going to continue with today's stories. We're jumping from talking about Bitcoin and quantum compute to a long read that I read last night regarding whether or not Iran is going from surgical strikes to boots on the ground. Yep, there could be some Karg Island deployments due to the war in Iran there. So yeah, let's bring this chat up on the street from France 24 or France 24. And they were reporting that, yeah, guess what? Trump might be putting boots on the ground despite being the president of peace. So despite repeated denials from the White House, the boots on the ground rumor has become a logistical reality. Military transport flights into the region have actually tripled in the last 48 hours. And the administration is now rebranding a potential ground incursion as the establishment of security zones along the northern flank of the Strait of Hormuz. The stated objective is to neutralize coastal missile batteries that have kept Brent crude above $104, which effectively takes the oil infrastructure to protect global supply. Pentagon insiders suggest that these zones will extend 20 miles inland, which will create a permanent buffer. Now, does this remind you of Operation Desert Storm in the early, was it 1989, 1990? Like, yeah, because in the 1990, the mission was sold as a defensive shield to protect the Saudi Arabian oil fields, only to transform into a massive ground offensive, which you might remember, you might have lived through it. It was called Desert Sword. So the current administration is utilizing the same mission creep logic, arguing that air superiority is not enough and that a physical presence is the only way to stabilize the energy crisis, hollowing out the domestic economy. Now, the Crag Island, as it's called, is it Crag? Am I saying it right? No, Karg Island, whoopsie, is particularly interesting because, I mean, let's just show the clip of Trump and save my voice for a moment, because he says he could easily take the Karg Island, but he said that his preference would be, and he told this to the FT, to the Financial Times in an interview on Sunday, that his preference would be to take the oil, comparing the potential move to Venezuela, where the US intends to control the oil industry indefinitely following its capture of the Venezuelan strongman leader. So this, by the way, is Karg Island, and the BBC, you should be able to see this on my screen just now, is reporting on that over the past 24 hours. Let's take a look at the pictures here. Oh, no sound. Damn, no sound, no sound, no sound. Let's try that again. Apologies, everyone. I don't know why that didn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. Okay, I wanted to explain what's going on in Karg Island. In the meantime, hello to Rafo. Good to be with you, mate. Hello to Shang Tsung, who says it's a lazy day. You're scared by quantum compute. Mate, don't be. I mean, being scared by war is annoying. Yeah, I get that. Being scared by low Bitcoin prices, that should excite you. You know, if you're not using Bitcoin today, you're going to be using it in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time. So today's a great day to earn Bitcoin. Dead alts, that should make you happy. And then jobs taken by AI. yeah, jobs will be taken by AI, but it means that we can spend more time doing what we want, which is connection, which is observing the natural world, which is philosophizing about what we're doing on this planet, hurtling through space, and creating deep, meaningful connection with others. So yeah, AI is going to take all the crappy jobs that we do, that we have told ourselves that we get a purpose from, and instead we're going to be able to have more time to do what we want. And hopefully we don't have to feel that we're stuck in this treadmill. I was going to say hedonic treadmill, but it's not. It's this worky treadmill where we think that we need to be working all the time because we weren't put on this planet to just work all the time non-stop until we burn out and die, burn out and keel over. We're supposed to be taking in the wonder that is the world today. So I take some of your points that you're worried about the wars and a little bit quantum compute, but the rest you can be happy about it. And that's why you tune into Rocks on TV. Raffo, hello mate. Good to be with you today. Let's try to share this clip from the BBC once more.
Now, you may have heard of a very small rocky outcrop island about 15 nautical miles off the coast of Iran called Karg Island. What is its significance and why are the US making plans to potentially try and seize it? Hi, my name is Mikey Kay from the BBC's Security Brief, also a former strategic military planner in the British military. So why is Karg Island so strategically important to the US? Why are the US trying to seize it? Well, this is why. 90% of Iran's export crude oil comes through that island. 90%. And the reason for that is it's effectively a terminal. And the terminal allows very large tankers that can carry up to 85 million gallons of oil to be able to come up to the terminal quite easily and then come back down the Persian Gulf and out of the Straits of Hormuz out to China. China is the main user of Iranian oil. So why else is it important? It's also the economic lifeline to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC. And if you take that island and you hold it, then you're effectively cutting off their lifeline, their ability to be able to conduct war.
So that is explaining from the Beeb. It's actually quite a good explainer of how important Karg Island is to Iran. Have you ever actually just looked at Iran and got a sense of the scale of the place? Because I'm not being funny. This country is gigantic. It is a lot bigger than anything in Europe. It's bigger than France, Germany, Spain combined. It's about, 7 or 8 times bigger than the UK. It's a huge, huge country. So firstly, the idea that Trump could easily take this is madness. Now I'm just trying to find, where's Karg? Karg Island, where are you, boy? You need to find Karg Island to bring it up on the big screen as well. Because Karg Island, if you compare it, it's over here. If you compare it to the size of Iran, it's minuscule. And in theory, that would be all right to take, wouldn't it? But if you look at Iran as a nation, are you joking? That is, how many Frances is that? 4 Frances. And yet still, Trump is putting troops on the ground as part of this military sort of discussion tactic thing. Whereas if you look at Karg, and it is just, look, temporary closed cinema, temporary closed university, I wonder why. And then the rest of it is just gigantic oil tanker storage, development, refinery. It looks like a great place for the US to take if it wanted to seize their oil facilities. And as they rightly say in the reporting by the BBC, 90% of Iran's oil passes through this teeny tiny island called Karg. So it is incredibly, incredibly useful. And they could wipe out this island very quickly if they so wished. But why would they do that when, as with every war ever in the past sort of 60, 80 years, it's always about the energy, about the oil. Meanwhile, Rafa is saying, BBC telling the truth? Hey, let's not hate let's hate the game, not the player. The BBC can do good reporting sometimes. I'm not going to say that the entire organization is completely messed up. But, when it comes to explaining how important Karg is to Iran, I think that's fair. That's absolutely fair. But, I mean, it's just funny. You look at this teeny tiny island. If Trump was to take this place, how would Iran react? Well, who knows? But, in a world where physical borders are increasingly being redrawn by heavy artillery, Bitcoin is the only teleportable wealth that we have. the US military is moving to secure physical energy, but global capital, we hope, is moving into Bitcoin in the form of digital energy. I'm sure that you have bought some more Bitcoin, you've earned some more Bitcoin over the past couple of days, or maybe you've earned some more Bitcoin. But ultimately, we think that with the prices where they are, despite the fact that Iran is risking military people coming on the ground, despite the fact that quantum research papers keep being dropped, and what else we got? Inflation prints higher, oil and gas prints higher, and yet the Bitcoin price is not tanking. My God, maybe we're at the end of this bear market. Maybe. Okay, I wanted to jump into the Square news as another Bitcoin story before I take a little break and we show some adverts. But the first thing I want to show you is regarding the news of Square. We did cover this yesterday on Rocks on TV, but I wanted to show the sort of negative side of it, a bit of skepticism, because Miles, who is an important bloke at Square being the biggest POS, one of the biggest POS providers in the US, he said that, starting today, eligible United States Square sellers will begin having Bitcoin payments automatically enabled. Sellers who accept Bitcoin will receive USD as default. And this is how Bitcoin as everyday money begins. Now, you will know of Square if you live in the West. It is very, very common. You see these point of sale devices in the UK, in America, in France, Monaco, there's quite around the world. And I want to show just how prevalent the Square payment devices are, because if we look at btcmap.org just now, so you can see it on my screen, that the US now has lots and lots and lots of dots, which are Bitcoin merchants. This map, 6 months ago, a year ago, was barren. There was very little Bitcoin merchant payment activity in the US. But now I can go to Nebraska. Let's zoom in on Nebraska, what's going on here. And there's a place in Grand Island that accepts Bitcoin at Barrable Coffee. And you can see that only 4 months ago, it was added as a Bitcoin Lightning destination, presumably due to Square. If I go to Hastings, I can see that on the 25th of February, so just 6 days ago, it was added. I can see that this West Coast cuts, 9 days ago, it was added. So a lot of these dots being added to BTC Map today. This one here, 475 vital connections. I would hazard a guess that 95% or more of the recent dots added to BTC Map, which are merchants. Here's another one, added 29th December 2025. This is a White Buffalo studio, which looks to be a tattoo studio. A lot of these places were added due to Square adopting Bitcoin. So it's kind of a huge story, and it's something that I'm really excited about, and it's really going to move the needle when it comes to Bitcoin payments adoption. However, and this is an important point here, Erin Malone, someone I respect in the Bitcoin space, she said, not a single business I've been to today with a Square POS can accept Bitcoin. She's still waiting to hear if someone found one business that can accept it, because so far, none have it enabled. She's been really disappointed by this Square news, because even though Miles and Square explained that Bitcoin has been turned on effectively at all these POS devices, POS short for POS short for point of sale, rather. And she also went on to say, this has been an absolutely terrible marketing and terrible execution. The one business here that is run by a Bitcoiner has been trying to enable payments for months, hasn't been able to get a hold of his rep to fix his issues. This is embarrassing. So one of the designers at Blocks and at Square, the guys behind this, he says, we can't control the narrative that influencer accounts choose to run with and what folks choose to convince themselves is true. That's a great way of shirking responsibility, isn't it? He says, we've always been transparent and never have we said we just flip it on for every single merchant at once because, well, that would be reckless. Erin hits back with, well, tell that to Jack Dorsey, presumably, and all the other devs that are promoting it otherwise. You also need to rethink your strategy because it's clearly not working. Now, Erin is not alone in being sort of disappointed by this adoption strategy implemented by Square and by block. Because, as Miles said, we're making it easy for millions of businesses to accept Bitcoin. Eligible Square sellers will begin having Bitcoin payments automatically enabled. So that should mean that in theory, you walk into any shop that has Square and you should be able to pay in Bitcoin. And yet, Club Orange, a company that I admire, Michael, who went out with Club Orange, says, Club Orange called it Bitcoin Adoption Day and went around LA en masse to support Bitcoin accepting Square merchants. Unfortunately, 0 Bitcoin was spent, but at least they took a cool message. They also shared on their own Twitter, make sure it looks good on the screen, sorry. I want to share this tab instead. Boom. Millions of US merchants can now accept Bitcoin because, they followed Miles Suter's news. Then they said, but can you find the local Bitcoiners ready to spend? Club Orange is where they are. They didn't actually share whether or not they were able to spend Bitcoin. Where are their tweets about that? They haven't done it yet. But others shared that, we would like to have seen this implementation a lot better. And they would have liked to have seen, the Bitcoin implementation better. Naturally, the Bitcoin conference, the Bitcoin magazine, one of the worst pieces of Bitcoin, or it's not Bitcoin, it's one of the worst pieces of crypto media. They shared, Jack Dorsey's Square just automatically enabled Bitcoin payments for 4 million merchants. No, they didn't. That's not fair because Miles Suter said that eligible US sellers had Bitcoin payments automatically enabled. But whatever, this is what Bitcoin magazine does. It takes a piece of news and it times it by 1 million and then it presents it to the world. But yeah, ultimately they don't have Bitcoin Square enabled sellers across the whole of the US. It's only some of them. And a lot of people are pretty disappointed by this. So I just wanted to show that, yeah, this is awesome that Square has enabled Bitcoin payments across the whole of the US. However, it doesn't mean that every seller is now accepting Bitcoin, unfortunately. And also, it also requires the seller to not be anti-Bitcoin. Okay, let me finish off with this story today because, from rural coffee shops to Manhattan boutiques, you should be able to pay with the Lightning Network. However, the rollout is hitting a wall of reality. Some of the merchants are unable to still accept Bitcoin. Some of them haven't had it turned on automatically. Influencer accounts have over-exaggerated this news. And some New York residents, they remain excluded due to the bit license. And there's also the tax trap, which remains one of the primary frictions, because technically every $5 latte is still technically a taxable capital gains event in the event of the IRS. I mean, to that I would say, stop being such a side salad. Just who cares about a 2-cent capital gain or capital loss? No one cares. No one's coming after you for buying a coffee with Bitcoin. But, this is just me and my 2 cents on the matter. But yeah, the Bitcoin angle to this is quite a big experiment in Gresham's law, which states that bad money drives out good, all things being equal. So I think that people say a lot, why would you spend Bitcoin, which goes up in value, when I can use my bad money, the inflation of US dollars, to spend on it instead? And I say, all the dollars, all the pounds, all the euros you have in your bank account means that you are technically short Bitcoin anyway. Square is doing what it can to build the rails for a Bitcoin circular economy, but until the tax code stops treating Bitcoin like a tech stock and start treating it like money, it will guarantee that lots of US, American side salad people still treat it like a hoarding asset rather than treating it like freedom money that it is. So I am pretty jaded by that side of the Bitcoin community in the US. Go out and spend your Bitcoin, go out and use it today. You might feel differently about your approach to savings technology, about your approach to Bitcoin generally, because Bitcoin is money. And in many countries around the world, I have documented it as such. And yet in the US, they really struggle with the fact that there's a little bit of a tax issue when it comes to using Bitcoin. Okay, this is kind of similar to the launch of credit cards in the historic times. Bank of America, which was one of the first US banks to bring credit cards to market, credit cards to the US, they dropped about 60,000 unrequested credit cards into the mailboxes of many people across California. And this caused a, as you'd expect, chaotic mess of fraud and merchant confusion. But it did ultimately change how humans interact with value. So I wonder if Jack Dorsey's belief and his attempt to do the same sort of digital drop today is that he hopes that Ubiquity will eventually force the government to modernize the tax code. So is Jack Dorsey and Block and Square's decision to enable automatic POS Bitcoin acceptance across all of its merchants across the US, is that a way of forcing the government to modernize the tax code? That is the question that I put to you guys, dear viewers. I'm going to take a very quick break and we'll come back for the remainder of our stories today, which is going to look at prediction wars and finally the Nakamoto tumble, which is the David Bailey bottom. No one wants to see the David Bailey bottom, and yet here we have it. Sorry, pun intended. Right, see you guys in 3 minutes. We're going to take a very quick break.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Hello everyone, welcome back. I found an interesting tweet based off the quantum story that I wanted to show you because it's from our friend Pascal Gauthier from Ledger. This guy really does say a lot of blah blah at the best of times. He reacts to the sort of quantum computing story by saying, Bitcoin cracked in 9 minutes. Headlines are going viral today. The truth is, Google just showed that the math is advancing faster than most expected. I'm going to stop with a silly French accent, but you know, he's in Paris. He is a Frenchman who's the head of Ledger, which is of course the data breach attack vector hardware wallet. which every 6 to 9 months has another data leak and exposes lots of people's harmful information. But there you go. He says that that's serious progress. No one has the quantum hardware yet to touch your keys. Not even close. Bear in mind that he is incentivized to say this because at Ledger, they've been building for this exact scenario for years. Our hardware is already stress testing post-quantum signatures. He finishes with what looks to be a poem. He says, your assets are secure today and in the future. To the whole industry, stop waiting. The time for post-quantum migration is now. We're not just talking, we're shipping. Bit of promo to use the current news, the current fear of the day to sell more devices. But this is how the industry works, right? And this is what I've kind of been trying to say since this quantum computing news story has developed. You show me what someone does in the world relative to Bitcoin or crypto, and I can pretty much predict what they're going to say based off of quantum computing. So if it's a crypto company, they're going to tell you, oh, Bitcoin's going to die, buy Ethereum instead. If it's a hardware wallet company, they're going to be like, oh, we've been working on this stuff for years. We've been seeing quantum computing coming forever. If it is a Ethereum sponsored research company, they're going to be like, ZK proofs are the future. Bitcoin proof of work is dead. And this is why Ethereum is better money. You show me the crypto VC, they will say that quantum is going to break Satoshi's signatures, Satoshi's keys. And that's why you need to invest into their quantum research development company program. You show me a Bitcoin dev, they'll tell you that they've been working on it for months and that it's been something that Satoshi has talked about for years and years and years. And you show me the Bitcoin journalist like myself, and he will just give you a roundup because let's be honest, he doesn't really know what he's talking about. That's my summation of the Bitcoin quantum threat. Mate, it's not a threat if it's happening in 4 years, is it? I suppose it is a threat. You know, the heat death of the world is a threat, but it's happening in I don't know how many millions of years. But it's still a threat. Still a threat, even though it's far out, and we are probably going to prepare for it in a big way. Okay, we're moving over to our sort of fourth story of this deeper dive of today, and that is concerning Nakamoto, my brothers in arms, my what would you call them? Are they my brothers in arms? Well, they use my name. They use my name. But basically, the news here is that we have one of the bigger Bitcoin holders, Nakamoto. They sold a big fat chunk of Bitcoin. Poor David Bailey, the CEO of Naka. They sold 284 Bitcoin for $20 million at a 40% loss, which they originally bought at around $118,000, wow, per BTC. So is this a sign of a bear market? Yes, absolutely. But the story here is that the Bitcoin treasury firm, which is led by the CEO, David Bailey, disclosed in its March 30th SEC 10K filing that it sold the coins at an average of $70,422 per Bitcoin, which is way, way, way below its $118,000 weighted average buy cost from 2025. So there's a $41,000 difference in the price that it sold. Not doing so well here, is it? The sale funded a US dollar operating reserve for initiatives and expenses, which left Nakamoto with 5,000 BTC after initially building a 5,300 BTC net position that year via a $540 million raise. Critics highlighted the timing, with shares down a whopping 99% from 2025 highs, now trading at 23 cents. Let's see what the actual price is right now. Oh my God, it's gone lower. It's gone to 21 cents. Can you see this on my screen right now? Oh my God, how bad is this? Oh, I want to get this, maybe if I zoom in like that, and then we'll get it nice and centered on the screen. No, for whatever reason, it doesn't want to actually show the screen properly squared, but you need to trust me that the price has just taken an absolute fall. What I can do is I can upload an image instead, and we'll look at it that way. So let's do this. Let's share an image. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen, while I bring up the image instead. So we're going to bring this up. Desktop, bam, bam. Here we go. You should be able to see the Naka price on my screen just now. How grim is that? It is down so much over the past 5 years. You know, it peaked at $25. Now it's at 21 cents. It is down more than 99%. Wow. The Naka stock is not doing so well at all. But David Bailey is still, of course, championing his stock. And yeah, he pledged to exit healthcare, to scale revenue, and to grow his holdings carefully. But this episode spotlights liquidity challenges for public treasuries amid huge market swings. Curious to see what some of you guys think is the outcome of this. But my God, it's crazy when you think about I mean, here's a funny tweet that will make you chuckle. Crazy to think about what the market cycle was like back then. You know, you have the David Bailey posing for his subreddit interview where he said, with the caption that he just sold 284 BTC for $20 million. It's pretty funny, isn't it? Naka is really absolutely dying. But, you know, this is what they got to do. They need to fund the operating reserves, they say, as the company's shares plunged 99% from their 2025 highs and now trade at a measly 23 cents. This is, of course, a cautionary tale of paper hands institutions, because using Bitcoin as a treasury asset requires a very low time preference and a debt-free balance sheet. Bailey's firm, they tried to play the Michael Saylor game without the necessary structural resilience, and they took on a $210 million, it was USDT loan actually, from Kraken that turned them into forced sellers at the worst possible time. They are the weak hands that are being flushed out of the system before Bitcoin can experience another major leg up. And if you want my personal opinion on this, then I believe that we have a bit more to go down. We are still not quite at the depths of the Bitcoin bear market. We have more pain on the horizon for sure. Absolutely more pain on the horizon for sure. You know, there are a few more Bitcoin stories we can cover, but apparently I've got to end the shop at 12:55. So I'll just do a quick Bitcoin story to end rather than going into our big deep dive into Kalshi and prediction markets. So there is a video doing the rounds on Twitter currently, and actually across a lot of other sort of platforms. And it's from none other than Michael Saylor. And it's this AI generated promotional video from Strike. And it's pretty weird, but let's bring it up onto screen so you can see it as well. And we'll discuss it for the last sort of 30 seconds of the show. So here is the clip.
Are you on vacation here?
I live here. I'm retired. I just don't think I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life.
Wow, how did you make it?
I worked hard as an engineer to save money. Again. Then I put my savings into Stretch.
What is Stretch?
Stretch is a stock. Right now I get about 11% a year in dividends. Nice.
It's the Stretch, yeah, the Stretch. 11% monthly cash dividends, tax deferred.
So yeah, this silly AI clip on Michael Saylor's platform has, get this, 2.6 million views. The discourse coming out of Michael Saylor's mouth is very, very different to him 5 or 6 years ago saying, oh, Bitcoin is a cyber hornet swarming in space. Lots of Bitcoin influencers are lapping up this video. But yeah, the clip basically features a supposedly retired engineer who looks about 25 years old. Obviously, he's just an AI bot, but that's besides the point. And they claim to have achieved a comfortable retirement by investing their savings into Stretch stock, which offers this 11% annual dividend. The video sparked controversy and debates about the stock's legitimacy and dividend sustainability. Discussions, of course, compare Strike to MicroStrategy as investment options. A lot of crypto influencers are naturally just calling this absolute AI slop, which it, of course, is. But ultimately, is there something to this story? Is there something to Stretch? Do you buy Stretch? You know, a lot of people asking like, this is a sell signal. This is the top. It's some Bitcoin maxis are calling this, well, maybe Saylor has sent us here to destroy the Bitcoin market, because it doesn't look good, does it? It does remind me of the really toppy periods of Do Kwon, of FTX, and of Sam Bankman-Fried. It doesn't look like it's going to end well, hey? I am, not looking forward to how this one ends. I mean, let's see what the comments, let's sort by most liked on the comments and see what people are saying to Michael Saylor's video here. Okay, Martin Shkreli, who served jail time, he says, what on earth is this crap? Oh, a lot of people are calling it slop. Yeah, I mean, the SEC might get involved with this. Who knows? Curious to think what you guys believe on this. I've got to end the show just now, so I'm going to stop shop just now. Thank you so much for tuning in on all social medias. My name is Joe Nakamoto. It's been great to hang out with you. This is Roxham TV and also Joe Nakamoto Media YouTube channel. I hope to catch you here again on Thursday morning at 11 a.m. where we'll have another recap and then deep dive into various Bitcoin stories. And it's been great to hang out with you all. Do what you love and save in Bitcoin. And I'll see you on Thursday at 11 a.m. Come with questions, because I do like answering your questions from around the world. And have a wonderful day. Do something nice for yourself as well. Do something that AI can't do. Do what you love and save in Bitcoin. This has been Roxham TV. My name is Joe Nakamoto. See you.